So hard and got so far, but in the end it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it.
This video is for educational purposes only. This is the aftermath of all of the victims from the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, Parkland, Florida school shooting. What I'm going to share with you next will be the first ever compilation of autopsy findings of all of the victims. The media coverage basically only gave us a lot of superficial information, and over the weeks I've studied and gathered all of the medical examiner's testimonies. It's the least I can do to give a proper voice of what really internally happened to them, and for what? Nothing really, other than to expose the amount of damage what evil can do. I'll be stating their autopsy findings in chronological order of their deaths. As always, listeners' discretion is advised. The autopsy findings are gruesome and horrific to say the least, but it's mostly because of the type of weapon that was used. He used an AR-15 high-velocity semi-automatic rifle. A low-velocity handgun usually travels around 1,200 feet per second, but a high-velocity .22 caliber bullet can go around 3,000 feet per second. And when the bullet penetrates, it creates a temporary cavity as large as 20 to 30 times bigger the diameter of the bullet as it imparts its energy. And a lot of the time, the bullet will fragment, which is also known as exploding. You'll also hear the term perforated, and that's also known as through and through. Low-velocity handguns usually stay within the body, but this type of high-velocity weapon will go through and through tissue, bone, and then back out of the body again. As graphic as all of that sounds, you're only hearing the damage done. During the trial, the jury also saw the photos. So I hope that helps paint an unpleasant picture so you understand the gravity of what really happened. And with all of that said, let's begin. Luke Hoyer will forever be 15. He was only shot twice, but his body was riddled with holes. One bullet entered under his left jaw, exited, then re-entered near his collarbone. The left side of his neck had 3 holes. Then it crossed over the midline and went to the right side of his neck under the right collarbone. The bullet severed 2 major blood vessels that supplies the head and the brain, his right common carotid artery and his right brachial cephalic artery. That alone caused a lot of significant blood loss, and the blood had to go somewhere, so it pooled in his right chest cavity. The bullet continued to travel from the right neck to his right chest cavity. His right upper and lower lobe of his lung were injured, but the bullet continued to travel and it exited the upper part of his back. The other gunshot was to his left hip. It damaged his major blood vessel, the left femoral vein. That resulted in much blood loss. The bullet continued to travel and injured his rectum and portions of his small intestine, but the bullet kept traveling and it only stopped when it hit his iliac bone, which is part of his pelvis. The medical examiner stated that Luke probably could have survived the gunshot to his hip, but not the gunshot to his neck. He was most likely standing when he got shot in the hip, but then he was probably on the floor when he got shot to the neck. Rest in peace, Luke. Martin Duque Anguiano will forever be 14. Martin was shot 8 times. 1 gunshot was to his right cheek. The bullet went through his tongue, then through his mouth, shattering his jawbone, and then the bullet went through and through, going into his right upper chest. Another gunshot entered his right side of his chest, hitting his right 4th rib. Then it went through his right lung, traveled to his left lung, and then also hit his left 6th rib in his back. And then another gunshot was to his right chest, hitting his right lung and then his right ribs. This bullet traveled downwards, hitting his liver. Another bullet entered his left lower torso. This bullet perforated his intestines, left kidney, and as it exited his lower left back, it also shattered his 11th back rib. Another bullet entered his right arm, and it went through and through, as it basically exploded his ulna and radius, which is his forearm. And then another bullet entered his left hand, through his palm, which we call a defensive wound. When bullets fragment in the body and pretty much explode, they take x-rays during the autopsies, and they call these type of x-rays snowstorms. This is how they described Martine's body. When law enforcement entered the building, they took Martine to the paramedics. He was hanging on to his last breath and unfortunately died on the way to the hospital. Rest in peace, Martine. Gina Montalto will forever be 14. Gina was shot 4 times. One bullet hit the front of her left shoulder, then it went all the way through and fractured her left scapula as it exited. The next bullet hit her left chest, which was a large wound. The bullet went through her left 5th intercostal space, fracturing her left 5th rib. But the bullet kept traveling, and it went into her pericardium and obliterated her apex. The pericardium is the sac that holds the heart, and the apex is the tip of the bottom of the heart. But the bullet also kept traveling into the left wall of her left ventricle. But the bullet stops in her back muscle. The medical examiner described a seared wound. Depending on how close the weapon is fired, will determine on what type of wound is created. And with the type of weapon used, the medical examiner explained that this was intimately close or had direct contact. Another bullet entered the left side of her upper abdomen. This too was also seared. It goes through her abdominal wall that perforated her liver, stomach, spleen, and left kidney. Then the bullet goes to her back muscle, where it is found. This wound had a faint muzzle abrasion, so it was in contact through the clothing to the skin. Sadly, Gina also had a defensive wound to her right hand, and with this type of weapon, it went through and through. I'm sorry, Gina. Rest in peace. Alex Schechter will forever be 14. Alex was shot twice in the chest as he heard the first gunshots and was trying to get out of his desk. One gunshot was to his right chest. It injured his upper right lung, and the spinal cord is transected. Another bullet entered his left chest. The bullet injured his muscle and creates a contusion of his upper side of his right lung. The bullet fractured his 7th thoracic vertebrae, which made it so he could not move from that level down. The medical examiner states he was most likely standing based off the direction of the bullets going from front to back and downward. When the massacre began, and Alex was one of the first people shot and killed, students thought that it was a drill. Other students testified that when they saw Alex bent over his desk, not moving and bleeding, they realized it was real. Rest in peace, Alex. Helena Ramsey will forever be 17. She was shot 4 times. The fatal shot was to the back of the right side of her head. It went through her scalp, entered the brain, and then exited the left side of her forehead. Her right chest had also been shot. This bullet did not go through and was found in her chest muscle, also known as the pectoralis. Another bullet went to her left shoulder and went through to her left arm completely. And then the last one went to her right leg, went through and exited her right thigh. Rest in peace, Helena. Nick Dworet will also be forever 17. Nick was shot 3 times. One bullet entered his right shoulder, then went down under his right clavicle, transecting his right subclavian artery and vein, also known as the right subclavian vessels. But the bullet kept going and passed also through his upper right lung, then entered his pericardium. Then the bullet lacerated his aorta, but the bullet kept going and it passed through the left side of his heart. Then the bullet went through the left lower side of his lung and lodged in his left chest. A bullet also grazed his abdomen and left thigh. There's a type of wound called shrapnel, which it's not a penetrating gunshot wound, but it's fragments of a bullet When the bullet is traveling and it hits something and explodes, and there's close contact of skin, it does significant damage. And Nick had a lot of this on his right hip and on his right ankle. Rest in peace, Nick. Elena Petty will forever be 14. She was shot 4 times. One gunshot entered her left breast and perforated her left lung, then traveled down her heart, ribs, and then exited the left side of her back. The second gunshot entered the left side of her chest as well. This perforated her left 7th front rib, then her left lung again, down to her liver, then to her left kidney, and then exited the left side of her back also. One gunshot was the top of her left arm, but since the bullet fragmented, there were multiple exit wounds, and basically made her arm explode. Another gunshot entered her right leg and went through and through to the other side of her leg. The grim irony of this is Elena was in the JROTC, and one of her favorite guns to fire was the AR-15. Rest in peace, Elena. Alyssa Al-Hadef will forever be 14. She was shot a total of 8 times. One gunshot entered her left chest. The bullet went through her left lung and also the left ventricle of her heart. Even though it was one bullet, it left 3 defects on her back, which they call shored exits. Alyssa was against a hard surface when she was shot, so it created a certain type of wound when it tried to exit the body. 2 other gunshots were to her left lower pelvis. This caused damage to a lot of blood vessels. 2 shots were to her right shoulder and right arm. These were also through and through. And sadly, 1 shot went through her left hand as a defensive wound. Rest in peace, Alyssa. Carmen Schentrup will forever be 16. She was shot 5 times. The fatal shot was to her right temple. The bullet perforated her skull and brain. Another gunshot entered her right breast, and another gunshot entered her right arm. A couple of bullets grazed her body, including her left forearm. The medical examiner that described her wounds was very vague and not as descriptive, so I believe the other 2 gunshots were the grazed bullets. Rest in peace, Carmen. Chris Hickson will forever be 49. He was shot 3 times. When Cruz first shot Mr. Hickson down the hall, the bullet entered at the top right of his leg and exited through and through the backside of his thigh. That's when he went and took cover near the elevator. But when Cruz found him down the hall, he shot him twice in the chest. One of the shots were to the left chest, and it perforated the muscles of his ribs, which were the intercostal muscles of the 3rd space. The bullet perforated his left lung, then exited his left side of his back. While doing that, it fractured his 4th and 9th left ribs in his back. The other shot is to his sternum, which is the very center bone connecting the ribs on both sides of your chest that covers your heart. The bullet obliterated his right 7th through 10th rib cartilage, then perforated his right lung. It also tore through his diaphragm, the muscle that helps us breathe. Even through all of that, the bullet kept traveling all the way through his liver and abdominal muscles, and the bullet exited his abdomen. When law enforcement initially entered the building, Mr. Hickson was one of the first victims they saw. They dragged him out of the building and tried to help him, but unfortunately, he died on the way or at the hospital. The number 14 has always followed Mr. Hickson. He graduated high school on the 14th, joined the Navy on the 14th, got married on the 14th, and he died on the 14th, with 14 students. Rest in peace, Mr. Hickson. Thank you for your service. Coach Aaron Feiss will forever be 37. He was shot 2 times. One gunshot entered his left armpit region and fractured his 5th rib. The bullet destroyed his upper and lower left lung. The bullet continued to travel, fracturing his 8th rib. By this point, the bullet had fragmented in so many pieces, creating a snowstorm in his back. The second gunshot fractured his 8th rib on his left side. It traveled down and obliterated his liver. But the bullet continued traveling, damaging his stomach, pancreas, and then hit his right kidney, which caused massive bleeding. Since Marjory Stoneman Douglas has been around for a while, Coach Weiss also graduated from this school. Coach Hickson and Coach Weiss will forever be remembered as brave heroes. Those who protect and save children instead of harming them should be the highest of honors. Thank you. Rest in peace, Coach Weiss. Scott Beagle will forever be 35. He was shot 4 times. 2 gunshots entered his left torso. The 2 gunshots were very close in proximity of each other, that they basically hit the same objects of the body. Together they injured both his upper and lower left lung, then his pericardial sac, his heart, and major blood vessels, which were his pulmonary arteries, aorta, and pulmonary trunk. The bullet went through his upper and lower lobes of his right lung and fractured the right second rib. Another entrance gunshot was the left side of his back. The bullet severed his 8 through 9 thoracic vertebrae and spinal cord. The bullet fragmented, so the medical examiner also explained that Mr. Beagle suffered from a snowstorm of wounds. Thank you for opening your door, Mr. Beagle. Your brave sacrifice did save students' lives. And I read that when you were talking to your fiancé, if you ever died in a school shooting, that she should tell people the truth, that you were a real jerk. Well, the truth is, you're not. You're a true hero. Thank you, Mr. Beagle. Rest in peace. Jamie Gutenberg will forever be 14. She was only shot once, but that one bullet tells a story of complete damage. Jamie only needed 1 more second to make it out of the hallway into the stairwell. But that one bullet hit her, and it went to the left side and her left shoulder. The bullet traveled through her back, fracturing her left first and second posterior ribs. The bullet entered her left chest cavity, which perforated her upper left lung. The bullet then severed her 7th cervical vertebra and then exited the base of her right neck. I can only hope that when the bullet severed her spine, that she didn't feel any more pain. Jamie's wounds prove that it only takes one bullet in 1 second. Rest in peace, Jamie. Meadow Pollock will forever be 18. She was shot 7 times. One of the bullets entered her left side. The bullet went through her posterior 7th rib. Then the bullet fragmented and perforated her left lung. It also fractured her 8th thoracic vertebra that transected her spinal cord. The same bullet traveled to the right lung, right 6th rib, and then exited her right side of her torso. Another bullet entered her left shoulder. It fractured her left scapula and then exited the left side of her back. Another bullet entered the right side of her back, through her right scapula, right clavicle, and then exited her right shoulder. Then yet another bullet hit her left hip, it perforated her left muscles, and exited her left buttock. And yet another bullet entered her right buttock, and that perforated her right buttock muscles. The medical examiner explained there was a snowstorm in her leg. Meadows' last wound would not be an official penetrated gunshot. It was a graze, but it was the most deadly. But the graze was at the top of her head and hit her scalp. But because of the high velocity of the weapon, it caused her skull to fracture, and it caused injury to her brain, including hemorrhaging and contusion. Even if Meadow wasn't riddled with gunshots, the one graze to her scalp would have killed her. But if she wasn't grazed at her scalp, the shot to her lungs and her torso would have killed her also. And Meadow died a hero. One of the reasons why Meadow had so many gunshot wounds was because she threw her body over Cara Laughlin, and that kind of bravery will still be remembered. Thank you, and rest in peace, Meadow. Cara Laughlin will forever be 14. She was shot 3 times. One gunshot entered her right chest. The pathway went across her chest and injured her vena cava. Fragments of the bullet were found in her right breast. The other gunshot wound entered the same as the other shot to her right chest and had a similar pathway, but the fatal shot was to the side of her chest, which damaged her heart and then went to her back. She also had shrapnel impact wounds like Nicholas Dorette. 2 of the gunshots were to the top left side of her shoulder, and they exited the back left side. The medical examiner stated that the first couple shots to Kara were not fatal, but the last one to her heart was. Rest in peace, Kara. Joaquin Oliver will forever be 17. He was shot 4 times, but one of the gunshots to his left arm caused 2 holes. It entered the front of his arm but exited the back of his shoulder. Another gunshot was to his left leg. The bullet traveled from front to back to downward. It went through his tibia and fibula and also the soft tissues of his leg. The bullet went the inner portion of his front of his leg and then exited towards the ankle. I'm not sure which order the shots came in, but I believe before he went into the alcove of the men's bathroom, it was either to his left leg or his arm. But when crews found him hiding in the alcove, that's when the fatal one came. Sadly, Joaquin had a defensive wound on his right palm that went through and through, but the last gunshot was to his head. The bullet entered his left temple. The medical examiner quoted, "Relatively large and irregular wound." And the size of the wound being irregularly large is probably because the bullet first went through the palm of his hand and then hit his head. The bullet fragmented when it obliterated the metacarpal bones in his hand, so the pieces, when it got to his skull, it pretty much exploded. The bullet did go through and through, and there was an exit behind his right ear. This was one of the saddest parts of the autopsy findings to listen to. The medical examiner explained that his head was a lead storm, and the only thing keeping it together was his scalp and his forehead. Rest in peace, Joaquin. And last but not least, Peter Wang will forever be 15. According to the medical examiner, Peter was shot a total of 12 times, the most out of all the victims. As he was running down the hall trying to escape, most of the gunshots were towards his backside. One of those gunshots was to the right buttock, exiting through and through his thigh. The bullet fractured his acetabulum and iliac bone. The acetabulum is the bone that connects the hip bone to the femur. Another gunshot was to the back of his right knee, and as it traveled upwards, it exited on the right thigh. Another gunshot to the back was his right arm. It fractured his humerus, and then it exited and went into the right side of his chest. His right elbow was also shot. He was also shot on his right foot. It entered the back of his heel. The bullet continued to travel through his foot and exited on the top right. 3 other gunshots also hit the right side of the back of his body. Even with all of these gunshots being riddled to him as he's trying to escape, the medical examiner states these were not fatal if he got medical attention immediately. Sadly, Peter was laying on the floor right outside the stairwell door as Cruz was shooting at others in the hallway. I think about what Peter was going through right now. Not only is he probably going through excruciating pain from all of the gunshots, but he's also hearing his friends, fellow students, getting murdered. But as Cruz makes his way down to Peter, these next shots are what really kill him. There were 2 shots to his face, one to the right cheek and one to the right corner of his lip. One of the bullets went through his cheek, his tongue, and then exited on his left jaw. Both gunshots to his face had similar pathways and exited to his left side of his jaw, so it was one large wound. But that's not the only ones that killed him. The fatal blow went to the right temple on his head, which created multiple cranial fractures. The medical examiner explained it as burst-type injuries. The bullet traveled through his skull, through his brain, and exited the left temple. There were also multiple fragments, which also caused a snowstorm. Students testified that Peter was holding the door open for others. He was recognized for that and given the Medal of Honor. Thank you for your brave service. Rest in peace, Peter. As of today, Parkland is the 4th leading worst school shooting in American history. Since January 2013, there have been over 900 school shootings, K through 12, in America. And there have been over 1,000 total if you're including universities and colleges. It's alarming to say the least. And America needs to focus on mental health more than anything right now. Every day, about 12 children die from gun violence in America, and another 32 are shot and injured. About 68% of guns used in school shootings were taken from their home, friend, or relative, and 93% of school shooters planned the attack in advance. So that means in almost every documented case of active shooters, there were warning signs. So if you see something, say something. Because this is a matter of life and death, in the worst ways possible. Over 10 years ago, we started red flag laws. Most people haven't heard about it, and they don't really know how it works if they have. Red flag laws are extreme risk protection orders that can help reduce suicide and can also try to intervene in potential mass shootings. If you know of any threats or concerning behavior, you can contact your local law enforcement and/or FBI. But if you, yourself, the one listening right now, is the one making threats and contemplating some serious things, you do not need to suffer in silence. Please do yourself a favor and call SAMHSA's National Helpline. The acronym stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. There is hope and there is help. It's free, confidential, 24/7, every day of the year. The number is 1-800-662-4357, which spells help. You yourself can call, or a family member can call for you. Hurting others never helped anything or solve any problems. It just created more. So please, reach out. They provide referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. You won't only be proud of yourself for making better choices, but others around you will also be proud of you. And it's not easy loving everyone. You don't have to even like them. But you don't have to choose violence to succeed. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, geeks.